Hello friends, welcome to our rotation where we are going to talk today about measuring in inches and in centimeters or millimeters today. So I have a line right here, and if I was measuring this line to the nearest inch, now this is really important. We have to pay attention to the closest unit that we are measuring to. So if I want the nearest inch, I'm looking for those whole inch markers, right? These are the numbers that are actually marked on the inch side of our ruler. So the closest inch, I have to look and see which two it's in between. So I see it's in between 1 and 2 whole inches. And it's not close to 2 inches. It's actually less than half. So that means the nearest inch would be 1 inch if we were measuring to the nearest inch. Now, if I was measuring to the nearest half inch, now we're getting a little bit more precise, because if I look at this line and say, oh yeah, this line is 1 inches, well, it's actually a little bit more than that. So the reason that we sometimes need to measure to the nearest half inch or even 1/4 inch or even 1/8 of an inch is because our measurement is going to get even more precise and accurate. And that's what we want, right? We want to be as accurate as possible. If I said this line was 1 inch long, it's close to 1 inch, but it's actually bigger than that. So that's why we need to be able to measure to the nearest 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch, those really tiny little spaces, so that we can be extra accurate about the measurement that we're making. So if I was measuring this to the nearest half of an inch, now I'm going to look for those half-inch jumps. So starting at 0, then the next half-inch jump would be right here. I'm looking at my whole inches and I'm breaking them into 2 pieces. Guys, this is fractions, okay? Okay, just wanted to make sure we understood that. Remember, fractions, math, it all connects. Okay, so here's my first half-inch jump, and then the next half-inch would actually land on a whole number. But that's okay. Remember, I'm thinking about these groups of half of an inch. So my next half of an inch marker would be here. Jump another half inch, I'm over here. Jump another half inch, jump another half inch. So as you can see here, these whole inch marks actually could be a measurement that we would choose to be the nearest half inch as well. So if I look at my line, I can see that it's actually exactly halfway between 1 and 1.5 inches. So we know that when something is exactly in the middle, we round up, right? So I would probably say that this measurement, this line, would be 1.5 inches long if I was measuring to the nearest half inch. Now, is that super accurate? We're still not as accurate as we could be, right? So now I'm going to measure to the nearest 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to see if we can get even more accurate than this. So now what I need to do is I need to start at 0 and see where these 4th jumps are, taking 1 inch and partitioning it into 4 pieces. Now here I don't even really have to start at 0. I can just look at the 2 whole inches that my line is in between. So my line ends here and it's in between 1 and 2 inches. So really, I just need to partition this inch right here into 4 pieces. So that's what I'm going to do. Here's halfway, okay, and I know with 4ths, I need to split these halves in half. So here is my, oops, not that. Here is my 4th inch mark, and here is my 4th inch mark. So if I check to make sure I've got 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I do. Perfect. So that means that this line right here and this line right here are pretty important to me when I'm talking about 4th inches. So if I look at this line, it's actually exactly on this 1/4 inch line right here. So this would be 1 inch, this would be 1 1/4, 1 2/4, 1 3/4, and 2. Guys, rulers are number lines. Okay, do we see how this all connects? Wow. So if I was measuring to the nearest 1/4 inch, this measurement would be 1 1/4 inches long. Now, that is about as accurate as we're going to get because it's exactly on that 1/4 inch line, which is really cool. But I can even measure to the nearest 1/8 inch too. So that means I'm going to look at my 1 inch where my line is in between. So let me kind of erase and start over here because I'm getting too many colors. So if I look between 1 inch and 2 inches, remember this is where my line ends, so I'm just looking in between 1 and 2 here. And I need to break up this inch into 8 pieces. Okay, so here was my halfway mark. Here was my 1/4, and now we know that we just need to break these into 8s, right? So each of these 1/4 is going to be cut in half. So that would mean this line right here is 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and 8/8. Okay, so now if I go to measure my line, I can see it's 1 2/8 of an inch. So if I was measuring to the nearest 1/8, I could also say that it would be this long. Now, these two things you can see are exactly the same. These two guys right here are equal. So if they're equal, you can just say the one that has the smallest digit denominator. Either one you could really say, but we would call this 1 1/4 inch because we don't necessarily need to go to 8 inches because we got it spot on, exactly on that line. So really we would call this 1 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so let me do another example with one more line, and this time we're just going to measure to the nearest 1/4 and the nearest 1/8 of an inch. All right, let me clear this out here. All right, so I'm going to change the size of my line slightly. I'm going to go to about right here. Okay, so I'm going to measure to the nearest 1/4 of an inch now. So I'm going to look and see what 2 whole inches my line is in between. So it's in between 2 and 3. Okay, now I need to find how I can partition this into 4 pieces. So here's my halfway point right here. And now I'm going to split that in half. Okay, here's my 4th line and here's my 3/4 line. Perfect. 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces is what I need for the nearest 1/4 of an inch. So if I look at my line and I'm trying to see if it's closer to 2 or 2 1/4, and it's actually like farther than halfway. Halfway between 2 and 2 1/4 would be right here, and it's farther than half. So this to the nearest 1/4 inch would be 2 1/4 inches long. It would be closer to this mark right here. If I was measuring to the nearest 1/8 of an inch, that means I need to split all my 4ths up again in half. So there's 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and 8/8 or 3. So if I look at my line, okay, it's in between 2 1/8 and 2 2/8, but it's closer to 2 1/8. So this would be my measurement for, if I was measuring to the nearest 1/8 of an inch, it would be 2 1/8. And this measurement is actually the most accurate for this line. It's the closest to this. 2 1/4, it's still kind of far away from. So this would be the most accurate that we could get for this line right here. All right, now I want to show you really quickly if our line was on a perfect, sometimes this happens, a perfect whole inch number, okay? And you were asked to measure to the nearest half or the nearest fourth of an inch or the nearest eighth of an inch. You would put 2 for all of those answers. The answer would just be 2 inches. If you're measuring to the nearest fourth, it would be 2. If you were measuring to the nearest eighth, it would still be 2. Because remember, if we're thinking about half inches, right? So here's my first half inch jump, half inch, half inch, half inch, right here on that 2. If we were talking about fourth of an inch, okay, here's 1, here's a half, here's 1 and a fourth, 1 and 2/4, 1 and 3/4, 1 and 4/4 is 2, so it would still be 2. If we were talking about eighths, 1 and 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, 1 and 8/8 is 2. So when you have a line that is exactly a whole inch, that is as accurate as you're going to get. So if it says measure to the nearest eighth and it's on a 2-inch mark or a 3-inch or 4 or 15, you're just going to put that whole inch number because this line is the closest half. It is the closest fourth. It is the closest eighth. So you would just put 2 inches. And we're done. So you are ready to move on to your next rotation activities. Have fun, everyone.